How sweet are thy words unto my taste, yea, sweeter than honey to my mouth. Through thy precepts I get understanding, therefore I hate every false way. Thy word is a lamp unto my feet, and a light unto my path.
Because all flesh is as grass, and all the glory of man as the flower of the grass. The grass withers, and the flower falls away, but the word of the Lord endures forever. Now this is the word which by the gospel was preached to you.
In the book of Colossians chapter 3 and verse number 5, the Apostle Paul would encourage Christians to mortify therefore their members which are upon the earth. He mentions specifically fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry. And looking at all 5 of those areas, we understand that pornography will touch every one of them. Welcome to the Biblical Christianity Podcast. My name is Terrence Brownlow-Dindy, the director of the Texas School of Preaching. As always, got beside me my companion, my buddy, my good friend, my colleague, one of the instructors here at the Texas School of Preaching, Brother Mornay Stephanus. Appreciate you being here, Brother Mornay, as always.
Good to be here.
And also, we've got a special treat with us. We've got another one of our adjunct instructors and also an instructor at the online school or Academy of Biblical Studies, Brother Rick Popejoy. Rick, always good to have you, brother.
It's good to be here today.
Yes, sir.
Looking forward to it.
Yes, sir. We are too. This week is our men's development conference at the BCS Church of Christ. And so we've got that going on this week. Got a lot of our instructors and other ones of our colleagues that are in town, College Station, on this week. And so our next few weeks of podcasts will contain some of our guest speakers with us. And so we are very glad these guys are in town, want to utilize their scholarship and their expertise in some of the fields that we will be looking at as we handle our next couple of weeks of podcasts. But we want to talk about something that is getting to be a pandemic, an epidemic anyway. And the church is not immune to this. And that is this epidemic of pornography. It's not anything that's new. It's not anything that's new, but it's certainly becoming a hindrance even to members of the church. It's becoming more profound day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year. And so, brother, we want to discuss the idea of pornography, the problems that are associated with this sin. And we certainly will not mince any words or leave you with any thoughts that we are not distinct about what we're saying here. Pornography is a sin. It is a sinful activity. It is a multi-billion-dollar business, which will give us some insight into some of the problem or the magnitude of the problem that this really is. And again, we really want to focus on and emphasize the fact that members of the Lord's body are not immune to this sin and to this problem. Matter of fact, we hear more and more day by day from brethren who are struggling with this problem. And so we want to be able to offer some solutions to it from what the Word of God has got to say. We want to look at the magnitude of this thing. We might break it down this way. We want to open our eyes to the problem of pornography in the first place. Secondly, we want to emphasize some of the dangers of pornography, and we'll see what those are. And then we want to look at offering a biblical solution to the issue. But when we talk, brothers, about the problem of pornography, let's speak in the first place to the fact that this is something that is becoming rampant, a very big problem among the brotherhood.
Yeah, when you take a look at the revenue of the pornography industry, I think it is fair to conclude that it is a very lucrative business. It's a very lucrative business, and we always ask the question, why is it that there are not more sanctions against the access of pornography on the internet? It used to be the case that you buy a magazine and you could look at pornography. That's where the writings, the pornographic fornication writings, grapho, and it used to be limited to that. But it is now available online. With the digital age, it's available, but there is access to it. And we ask the question, why is it that children have access to pornography online and even on social media? Why is government not doing more to stem that tide? Obviously, it starts in the home. And I think the answer to that lies in the revenue. I think the pornography industry has their hands, or we should say politicians have their hands in the industry of pornography, and they're benefiting from it somehow. We have to ask that question, why is this not happening? Why is it that it's still being allowed to be so popular, why is not more being done? And I think one of the reasons is that they are a very lucrative, it's $1 billion industry. And the reason some are not doing anything is because not only are they part and parcel of that situation, as we've currently, with the Epstein Island and all of those type of things, but also they benefit from pornography. They benefit from the sales of pornography. But just in conclusion, we understand that this is a lucrative thing, and it's lucrative because it's being allowed to continue, but also because people consume it, and the amount of people that consume it is evidence that this is a big problem.
Sure.
This is, you talk about the numbers are astronomical, and you mentioned billions. I'm going to up that just a little bit. It's well within the trillions of dollars now. I want to give you, these are stats that are a few years old, and it changes almost overnight as far as the stats are concerned. But if you put the revenue of the porn industry and you combined all the revenue of the NFL, the Major League Baseball, NBA, and you put all three of those together, it would not even come close to what the porn industry does. The pornography industry is larger than the revenue of the top tech companies combined. So if you put Microsoft and Google and Amazon and Yahoo and Apple and Netflix and all of those together, as well as others, then it would not even come close to what the porn industry does. If you took ABC and CBS and NBC, which, by the way, has a revenue of above $6 billion a year, then the porn industry exceeds that. By the way, we're just talking about the U.S. porn industry here. We're not talking about the worldwide industry. The size of the industry is 57 billion. Those are old stats worldwide. And that does, by the way, that doesn't even count R-rated movies. It doesn't count PG where there is pornography that is exposed. I mean, you're talking about one of the biggest industries in the world. And then if you add to that, the old saying used to be follow the money.
Yes.
Yeah, if you follow the money, then you'll see why. And this blows my mind, gentlemen. You mentioned it. Why is it that my grandchild, who may be 12 years old, can get on the internet and immediately come across and view hardcore pornography? I mean, it's listen, the Bible mentions these words, so I'm not afraid to mention them, but you can view bestiality online as a 12-year-old. Yeah. How is that possible?
Brother, that is absolutely just detestable, and that's what we're dealing with here. And I'm telling you, this is a heartbreaking subject matter, and so we don't take this lightly. We certainly don't propose that this is something that we take pleasure in talking about, but it's necessary because this thing is destroying lives before we even get to that again, but still looking at opening our eyes to the problem. So both of you guys have spoken to the revenue that's associated with it. And of course, we know that we live in a very covetous, materialistic world. And so anything that's going to make dollars, I used to hear old guys say back in the day, man, when in my BC days, if it doesn't make dollars, it doesn't make sense. And of course, man, that's the way people think. That's the way the world thinks. If it makes dollars, it makes sense. It doesn't matter who it hurts. It doesn't matter whose lives are destroyed by this stuff. And we're going to show you in just a little bit that, in fact, that is the case. Lives are being destroyed by this stuff. Marriages are destroyed by this stuff. Innocent is destroyed by this stuff. Families are being torn apart, and societies as well. So we're going to see that in a minute. But I want to add to some of those statistics that you guys have mentioned. And so you guys have talked about the financial statistics. Now let's talk about who all are the players who are dealing with this. Who are those who are taking advantage of this stuff? So here's some. There's a website called Covenant Eyes, and it offers the following statistics. 90% of boys and 60% of girls say they were exposed to pornography before the age of 18. 90% of boys, 60% of girls, 64% of Christian men, Now we're talking about Christian men, and of course they're using this terminology broadly. We understand that, but within the parameters of what they call Christendom, people who claim or profess Christianity anyway, 64% of Christian men and 15% of Christian women admit to watching porn at least once a month. 1 out of every 8 online searches and 1 out of every 5 mobile searches is for porn. Let that resonate with you. 1 out of every 8 searches. You know how many hours people spend on the internet? And 1 out of every 8 searches is for pornography. And then when you talk about these mobile devices, 1 out of every 5 searches on that is for pornography. And let this be known to you, audience. Every time you search anything, it is being documented.
Yes.
If you don't know that, you don't understand that, it's time that you know. Everything, not only is it the case that the Lord's eyes are open to everything that's going on in the world.
Watching.
Google is watching, Facebook is watching, and they're documenting these things. You wonder about why sometimes you might have pop-ups and things like that. They know what you're looking for. Brother Rick, if you and I search for automatic or semi-automatic handguns, we did that search. Don't be surprised if for the next several weeks you've got different gun companies, handgun companies that are popping up as pop-ups because they're looking at what you do. They're documenting what you look at. Pornography takes up 1/3 of the internet's bandwidth. So if your internet is running slowly on some days, you wonder what's causing that. It's not good, my friends. It's not good. And so, Brother Mornay, continue to speak to this idea of opening up our eyes to this problem.
Yeah, when we consider, we look at the revenue, we understand that there are people who are, as you said, who are so covetous, they will do just about anything to make money. And they don't care about the lives that are being ruined. They don't care about your children. They don't care about your marriage. They're concerned about the bottom dollar, and they want to make money. And so they've given themselves to this industry, and they've given themselves to the making of pornography and the promoting of it. And that is not only, we're not talking about cloak and dagger individuals here. These are people in suits. These are people in companies. These are politicians. These are businessmen and businesswomen who do this. And so we have to open our eyes, I think, to the reality of this problem. It is not a shady background. Usually when you think of pornography, at least I guess this used to be the view of pornography, that it was the shady thing that happens somewhere in the back rooms of, whatever. That's not the case. It is open. And I think we need to also add into that, when we think about the prevalence of the problem, we have to talk about the R-rated movies. We have to talk about how pornography has flowed into the movie industry, and they are coming now live into your living room, if you allow such, into your living room, into the hearts and minds of young people. And that, I firmly believe, it's the gateway. It's the gateway drug, if you will. You watch the television, and all of a sudden there's a commercial of a half-naked woman, for baby diapers. Why she got to be naked? She's advertising baby diapers, but she's naked. Yeah. Ask yourself, why is it that individual, that all of these commercials are always showing cladly dressed women? Why? Because they understand what sells, but also they understand there's a bigger picture here. You can get them hooked on this one thing.
Right.
You just follow the logic here as far as that is concerned.
And it's not only just a hook, it's also a redirect of the mind. Mm-hmm. They understand that if somebody is watching that and they're trying to, say, give up on pornography, that's a hook. Again, it's a redirect of the mind to cause it to go in that direction. Let me ask you a couple of questions here. What would y'all think would be the average age of the first internet exposure that a person has?
I'll say this. I'm not sure what statistics you got, Brother Rick. I'm very interested in hearing those, but I will say this. I did a lectureship a number of years ago at the Florida School of Preaching on why some fathers fail. And the points were because they're not there, they're not aware, and they don't care. And when we looked at the point, they're not aware, I found some statistics that talked about children's exposure to the internet, and I found out that, I forget the percentage, but it was something like 60% of 3-year-olds have what they called an internet fingerprint.
Isn't that something?
That's crazy.
Yeah.
That is, it's absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
But you're talking about below. You're talking about below 11 years old and below.
Yes, sir.
Is the first. By the way, and that doesn't include the PG-R rated. Doesn't include the commercials. By the way, we're talking about hardcore stuff here.
Yes, sir.
We're not talking about just pornography. So these individuals who would say and argue that pornography is just a harmless adult pleasure. Well, first of all, there ain't no such thing when it comes to sin.
That's right.
But it's not directed just to adults anymore. The largest consumer of pornography, that group that you mentioned earlier, 12 to 17-year-olds. How is that even possible in a society? I love the freedom that we have in our society. I love the free access of information. But that is entirely different when you're talking about the smut of the world and our children here.
Yes, sir.
80% of 15 to 17-year-old boys have had multiple hardcore exposures. I mean, we're children's cartoon characters are being utilized. If you type in Mickey Mouse, you better be careful. I remember a few years ago I was doing an article on Culpeper Minutemen and trying to talk about Minutemen in the church. And so I typed in just Minutemen. Oh, no, don't type in just Minutemen to your, no, don't do that. Whitehouse.com was a favorite. It may still be, but my wife was in a classroom and she's teaching fifth graders access to the internet, and it should have been whitehouse.gov. But whitehouse.com, you see how deceptive these individuals are?
Yes, sir. And like you said, that's what they're intending to do.
Yes.
These people, they're shrewd. They know what they're doing to, like you mentioned, Brother Mornay, to hook, and like you mentioned, Brother Rick, to redirect. They know what to do. And in order to do this, these guys are about this business of making money through this smut, through this filth. And so they know what to do in order to make it happen. You just talk about, we've given you a lot of statistics, but let me tell you, this is not just empty statistics being thrown at you. This stuff is in our front yard, on our front porch, is in our living room. I'm talking about the problem. I'm using a metaphor to talk about the problem. A number of years ago, one of the congregations I preached at, a number of years ago, I had a sister in Christ, single mother, come to the elders and myself and said, look, I need help. I need help. I looked at my cell phone. I discovered when I was going through my history, child did not know how to turn off the history. She had access to the mother's phone. Hardcore porn. She says, man, my eyes can't unsee what I saw when I went, and clicked on my history after my child had my phone. And so says, she's addicted. She talked to her about it. She's hooked on it. We asked her, the child sitting down in the midst of her mother and me and the elders, how did you learn how to do this? She said, one of my friends, this is a third grader now, one of my friends showed me how to do this on the playground. And so, man, let me tell you something. We're going to talk about the solution to the problem in just a moment. I'm just going to give you a quick preview of that. But supervision is something that God absolutely expects. It is our job to be aware as adults of what is going on in the lives of our personal children and the children over which we have custody for any given point of time, whether I be a school teacher or someone in the church or whatever the case may be. But this thing is a problem that is absolutely phenomenal and astounding, and it's right here in our face in the church. And I hope that we are taking time to make sure that we educate our members as to the fact that this is something that we're going to have to deal with overtly in the Lord's church. For the sake of time, I do want us to move on to our second point, and that is this, emphasizing the dangers. Now, we've already talked about some of those dangers, but Brother Mornay, let's get more specific into looking at what this habit, this sinful habit, will do to a family, what it will do to a mind psychologically, some of the brain chemistry that is involved in this type of filthy habit.
Yeah, I think it's a common understanding when you, and I don't have the statistic in front of me or a psychological reports in front of me, but when you talk about pornography and what it releases in the brain, there is always a desire for more. There's always a desire for more.
That's right.
Why? Because
Dopamine.
the dopamine release, and it stimulates but that's never enough, and so there has to be more. And this is where the progressive, digressive behavior comes in. Now it is the bestiality, as you mentioned. Now it is all sorts of other perverseness. And I do believe, as my estimation, and it may just be that, but I do believe that pornography is one of the, or not the leading cause of the rise of homosexuality. I believe that there is a link there between that behavior and the need to experiment, and the need to, especially in our young people, as you mentioned, they are exposed to these things younger and younger and younger, and so obviously there's a need to go further, and so we see more homosexuality. Why is that? Maybe it's the case that of the things that they're viewing when they are younger, but not only the dopamine release, the need for more, and the need for more egregious things, the need for to engage in those type of things, but also take a look at the amount of time, as you mentioned, the amount of time that people spend on this. So just from a logical perspective, if you are watching pornography and you're spending that much time on watching pornography, what are you not doing? You're not working. You're not being productive. You're not spending time with your family. You're not engaging in that. If you're a husband, you're not spending time with your family. You're not spending time with your wife. You're not doing it. So it takes away from the normal aspects of life, and it consumes you, because this thing will consume you. It's an addictive process. And so you think about the dangers. Most of the time, as you mentioned, people say, "Well, it's just a harmless adult indulgence." No, it's not. There's inherent dangers associated with it, and the problem is sometimes those dangers are related to the personal, to the individual, and the world doesn't necessarily see that. But you have to consider yourself and what it's doing to you, and the digressive nature of it.
And one of the things that we have here is we're dealing with a specific of a very generic. I mean, sin in and of itself continues to wax worse and worse. It doesn't just inherently just smooth itself out. It takes a great deal of intensive effort to be able to resist sin, but also from the vantage point of getting out of sin. And it takes at least twice as much energy to get out of something than it does to resist it in the first place. And so there's a dynamic here of sexual sin in and of itself. And like you said earlier, this is not anything new. I mean, since the days of Cain and Noah, there have been sexual sins involved in this world and it only leads to one thing: sin, destruction, death.
That's exactly right, brother. You look at the book of Proverbs, and I'm telling you, during our men's development conference, we're going to have a panel discussion on raising sons in this crazy world. I've raised 3 of them, and I'm telling you, we had the pleasure of being able to homeschool our children, so we got to set the curriculum, and obviously the Bible is a hefty portion of the curriculum that we utilize to teach our children. And I'm telling you, the book of Proverbs, my sons will tell you, man, we went through this, my wife and I with them, and our morning devotionals, went through the book of Proverbs with them multiple times, man. We're introduced to the strange woman in chapter 4, and guess what? We see appearances of her in chapter 4, chapter 5, chapter 7, chapter 8. She makes about 6 appearances. And what is Solomon, this wise man inspired by the Holy Spirit, doing? He is trying to steer his sons clear of this strange woman and the absolute detriment that she would do to his life.
May I draw your attention to Proverbs 6:27? As soon as you mentioned Proverbs, this comes to my mind every time. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned?
There you go.
He's talking about these sexual sins, and he's saying it is impossible to engage in sexual sins without there being consequences upon that person.
That's right.
Can one go into hot coals and his feet not be burned?
That's it.
So he that goeth into his neighbor's wife, whosoever toucheth her, shall not be innocent.
Yeah. I want us to be, before I make this next statement, we understand that not everyone is tempted in the same way. Yes. There may be some who are not tempted by pornography because this is not, we get that. But when we talk about something like this, we understand that especially when we look at males who probably engage in pornography more so than statistically more so than women. If you're a red-blooded male you know,
But
you
the
will.
statistics are changing, by the way.
Yes. Yeah, and that's why I say statistically, it's, you know, but I have heard that the statistics are changing. You're a red-blooded male.
Mm-hmm.
God has designed you to be attracted to the opposite sex.
That's right.
Right? And so Proverbs chapter 5 and verse 3, notice what he says. For the lips of a strange woman drip as a honeycomb, right? And her mouth is smoother than oil. There is an attraction here. Honey is sweet, you know, and so there's an attraction here. There's something that is desirable, right? And that's what we're warning against is you have a young man in your home, as you talked about raising boys, you have a young man in your home. Don't for one second think, if he is a red-blooded young man, don't for one second think that he's not desirous of the opposite sex. That's how God created him. You have to pay attention to that.
That's right, and that's what we want, man.
Yeah.
We told our boys, man, you know, when it come time for them to hit puberty, and even before that, when they start to be attracted to girls, we encourage them. That's the way God wired you. That's the way you're supposed to be. Now, obviously, God has created a certain framework wherein to be able to exercise your sexuality. And of course, you got to keep things nipped and tucked and in check until that time. And that is within the confines of a lawful marriage. And that is it. That is the soul arena wherein human sexuality can be explored. But man, it's perfectly natural.
Yes.
For them, and we encourage that. Look, you talked, Brother Monet, a moment ago about how this thing hurts the individual that becomes involved in it. But as we talk about the problem with this and the emphasizing the dangers, not only does it hurt the people that are involved with it, you become desensitized. The more you see a thing, the more it desensitizes you. The Roman, you know, I did a real quickly a paper back in school years ago on the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. And one of the things I found out is that they would a lot of times take their small boys, whether it be the Italian or those that they would conquer and incorporate into the army, and they would make these very small children, 6, 7, 8 years old, participate in execution of prisoners and things like that, opposition soldiers, and they would have these kids watch this blood and gore all their lives. So whenever they become 18 years old, it doesn't bother them at all to see the blood and gore that's associated with warfare. And that's the way the human mind and the human brain works. And so people become desensitized. It destroys marriages because a husband wants to see created in his bedroom what he's watched on TV or on the internet. And you know, and a lot of times the wife's not going to be able to, in his mind, in that sick, twisted mind, be able to measure up to what he's seen in pornography. And so that becomes problematic. But here's something that it breaks my heart, and I almost can't talk about this without tears coming to my eyes. It's not only the consumer of pornography that is being hurt in this. Listen to this. America is the second largest market of child sex trafficking in the world. Be aware. You said people sometimes like to think that pornography is just, it's my business. It's consenting adults doing something that we all agree. Absolutely not. That's right. So many times you are looking at people, if you are partaking of this filth, you are looking at people who are sex slaves.
Yeah.
And from statistics I'm looking at, more and more is children being forced into sex slavery and becoming the fetishes of sick people watching this stuff. Man, there's nothing, Brother Rick, that's innocent about this.
You know, no, that's exactly right. And to speak to that effect is the most horrendous crime against humanity is the crime against the innocent. Sure. There is not a page in our Bible that does not talk about taking care of the innocent, the widow and the orphan, and those that are helpless, that cannot take care of themselves. God has special provisions for them, and we have taken what God has blessed us with the provisions of this world. And like Ezekiel chapter 16, verse 49 and 50, like our sister Sodom, We have had an abundance of things, but we have turned it around and consumed it upon ourselves. And that's where the sexual sin begins. But might I also say this in regard to, I want to go right to the heart of the matter. We can blame, and rightfully so, they have their own blame of the porn industry. We can blame individuals that are a part of everything else, of putting this together and all the money that's associated with it. But when it boils down to it, when it comes across my eyes, God says it's my choice.
That's right.
And that's where James chapter 1, you talk about the solution, that is the solution.
That's the solution. And so with just about a minute that we've got left, I'm sorry it's gotten away from us. But when you get down to the solution, that's it. So James chapter 1, verse number 13, God says there through the pen of James, let no man say when he's tempted that I'm tempted of God, for God himself cannot be tempted with evil, neither does he himself tempt any man. But every man is tempted when he's drawn away of his own lust. That word idios, you talked a moment ago, Brother Mornay, about not everybody has the same temptations. That's exactly right. The term idios means something that is unique to me. Something that's unique to me. So pornography might not be this brother's problem, but it might be this brother's problem. Maybe this brother's problem is speeding or alcohol or drugs or whatever the case may be, gambling. So we got to know ourselves. We got to know ourselves. And so when we talk about knowing who we are, then making provisions and setting forth safeguards that are going to help us. Man, that's something I try to tell young men. I'm telling you right now, this moment, I got about 4 young men that I'm working with this problem of pornography. And one thing I continue to emphasize to them, help yourself.
Amen.
Do yourself a favor.
Proverbs 5 and verse 8, remove thy way far from her, and come not nigh to the door of her house. Help yourself. And so he's instructing his son, you need to do something. As Rick just said, it's not just the pornography industry that has guilt to it. All of us stand guilty because of our own actions. We need to do something. If we're confronted with sin, David should have walked away on that roof.
That's right.
Right? And that is where we encourage our young men and our young women is you have to do something. You have to remove yourself. And the Lord said, he said, cut that thing off. Matthew chapter 5, there's sin. Cut it off. Remove yourself from it. Do something.
And this is where we're not willing to go. We are an internet-connected community. And I have my phone. By the way, you can have a phone without having an internet connection.
Yeah.
And if your right eye offend thee,
Cut it off.
Cut it off.
Look, that's it. As we close up here, drastic situations call for drastic measures.
Amen.
Like you said, we don't have to be connected to the internet. I know that people are going to have convulsions when you say something like that, but we don't have to be connected to the internet. And look, at very most, we don't have to be connected to the internet when we are alone.
Amen.
Yeah.
There are filters. There are all types of safeguards that are available to us, accountability partners, preachers and elders talking about it more from the pulpit.
Yes. Yes.
Obviously being tasteful and tactful, but making sure that we're not trying to turn a blind eye and sweep under the rug the issue before us. Helping families to safeguard their children through supervision and things of that nature. Man, there's so many more things that we say about this, and Lord willing, at a further date, a later date rather, we'll be able to. But please, church, understand this is a problem that is growing among us. This is the Biblical Christianity Podcast. Again, thank you so much for being with us. This is a topic that we had to deal with that is one that's sensitive and heartbreaking, but hopefully we'll be able to tackle this thing in the church to where it will not cripple us the way it looks like it's starting to. But please join us next time. So glad that you're always here. Our email address is at the bottom of the screen. As always, if you have any suggestions for a later episode or any questions, we'll feel free to entertain all of those. Thank you for being with us.